Welcome to the Academy of Esports Podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan. I'm here with Sky Kauweloa. He's from the University of Hawaii, coming to us from Hawaii. Sky, thank you for being on the Academy of Esports Podcast.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we met very briefly at the University of California, Irvine last October at the ESC conference. And to me, that was one of probably the best esports research conferences that I've been to in my time involved in esports. I don't know what your feelings were on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was my second year there. I was at the first one presenting a paper that I did, and it's a fantastic group of people, and I think it's something that I think will only grow and collect a really diverse crowd of people who are interested in esports research from a number of perspectives. So I really was happy to see that continuation at that second one.
And I see that those of you who don't know, Sky is fairly active on Twitter and is also a PhD candidate at the University of Hawaii. But before we get into your PhD candidacy, before we get into all the great things that you're doing in your state of Hawaii, what kind of drew you towards esports? What was your experience kind of growing up that maybe brought you to this point where you're at right now, where you're researching and really trying to develop statewide experiences for kids in Hawaii?
Yeah, for me, the journey is one that, of course, I think for a lot of us, we can sort of like sympathize with, is that we started with games early on in our lives. I go back all the way to NES with Nintendo. I became a avid Street Fighter player in San Diego, where I grew up. So I mean, I'm from Hawaii, but I also lived in California for a while. And in San Diego, I became obsessed with Street Fighter as well as skateboarding, as people in California do back in the early 90s. And it was one of these things where it became it's really weird for a lot of us that look at video games as something that we do as either leisure or for fun, is that when we look back at our lives, especially in our early teenage years or early adulthood, like how significant video games have been in kind of keeping us busy or keeping us entertained. And it was only when I went into my master's and PhD program that I had that sort of like reckoning with myself when I was thinking about a particular topic to study for my PhD. So I did my master's at University of Hawaii, and I was in the School of Communications. And for that stint of time, I did research on what is called Kakao Talk, which is a Korean instant messenger program.
Okay.
And it was something that I was sort of fascinated with because I lived in South Korea for about 10 years before I started my master's program.
I must ask, for a military family then?
No, it was just going there to visit my wife's family. And yeah, so my wife is South Korean, and we met in college. And after I graduated, we decided to take a year gap and stay there. 1 year turned into 10 years. And it was one of those things. Yeah, it was roughly around from 2003 to 2000, I think 10 or 11, something like that.
Okay.
And it was, one of those things when I was thinking about, again, a topic of what I was going to study, PhD program, which is always a very sort of difficult thing, especially for me to kind of like pin down something to commit to, that I started to think about, what were interesting things and moments in my life in the past that were meaningful, and video games immediately popped up, and it kind of shocked me. So I decided to take a look at the Street Fighter scene because I had been absent and away from it for so long. And I really thought that Street Fighter scene may have died down. So I'm talking about, I stopped playing Street Fighter back in like 93 or 94. Never touched it, never looked back at the community, which was really strange because I was so deeply embedded into the community for so long. And that long absence had me thinking, oh God, I hope the scene is still there. Little did I know, when I went to YouTube and I typed in Street Fighter, that popped up was these list of Evo clips that kind of shocked me and kind of blew me back. It was not only that the Street Fighter scene did not die down, but it actually completely flourished in the time that that I've been away. So that was the catalyst for me, was to start to think about, looking at video games as a topic of inquiry, and specifically looking at esports. So I approached my advisor, completely expecting to be kind of laughed out of the room, and to say, for example, that, I wanted to study something called esports. Thankfully, I have an advisor that was very open-minded, very forward-thinking about technology and society issues. And she told me, and this is roughly around 2015, she told me, take the summer, look what's happening, see what's taking place, and if you think it's something that you want to pursue, let's go for it. And right around 2015, that was where you had RMU when they started their program in 2014, that stories about college esports had caught my eye. And so as soon as I started seeing what was happening with RMU, I went back to my advisor and I said, this thing called college esports looks interesting. I might want to take a look at it. And right after then, I made my first trip in 2015 to Robert Morris University and to UBC to begin my research.
Now it's funny that there's so many. You may not realize this, but there are so many similarities between kind of our experiences coming up. I guess I graduated high school in '93. My background was, I think I went the opposite direction of you though. So born in San Francisco area and moved all the way out to New York before moving back, skipping along the way because my father worked for the airline industry. Coming back to the Bay Area in 1987. And yeah, I remember seeing Street Fighter for the first time. It was at a 7-Eleven near San Jose State University. And I just remember my friend Darren, who just obsessed over this game. I remember we were taking a course at San Jose State as high school students. And I think we would skip class a whole bunch of times just to go play Street Fighter 2. And it was revolutionary for the time in a lot of ways. I know there was the original Street Fighter game, which wasn't nearly as popular, but Street Fighter 2, I mean, there was the combination of the joysticks with the 6 buttons that you had, the variety of characters, the multiculturalism even of the characters, if you will, even though they're very stereotypical, I guess you could say from today's terms, but the gameplay was just so fast, and the competitions, they would last only a couple minutes if you went one-on-one. It was a cultural phenomenon, if you will. I mean, there was even a Street Fighter movie that starred Raul Julia and Jean-Claude Van Damme. So,
no, I mean, you hit it on the nail. It was the first time I saw it, and it's one of those personal reckonings where I had to actually sit down and think about it. The first time I saw it. And I've always been into martial arts as a kid. I did Taekwondo for a very long time. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I've always been drawn to themes related to martial arts. And so when Street Fighter 2 came out, I was just completely fascinated by the entire spectacle. I had never been a part of a culture of arcade games before Street Fighter, even though I did play arcade games. I never was drawn into it. I mean, racing games were something that were kind of particularly interesting to me, but as you rightly say, the sounds of Street Fighter that you hear, as you say, it was actually in a 7-Eleven that I first played it. The ability to choose these archetypes of martial arts characters, I immediately identified with Ryu, and so to this day, it's amazing how much I have not changed. I only play Smash because I can download Ryu as a downloadable character. I hate every single other character in Smash. I absolutely despise almost every character, but I just only go back to it because there's, of course, with Smash Ultimate, you have Ken now. So yeah, it's just one of these crazy, freaky things where something as simple as a game kind of draws a continuous line through your life, and Street Fighter's been that way for me.
And it must be, for me, my character was Balrog. And I know that wasn't possible until there was Street Fighter. I think it was Street Fighter Ultimate when you could play the boss characters. Because before, I think it was just the original 8. It was 8 characters to start with. And but when I was able to start playing the boss characters and Balrog became my person, I liked Balrog because you didn't have to kick. It was all just punches. And the button combination was very simple. I am not a good gamer, but I would stand and watch people play these games for a while, and it was just so fascinating not to be good at it. And occasionally I would throw some quarters in, but just to be able to stand back and watch the game play and watch how people interacted, that to me was the most fascinating part of this. Was there anything like that for you, or are you more just like, yeah, let me get in and get to playing the game?
No, it was the fact that I was able to play against strangers that was also the draw.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, again, it goes back to this idea of how powerful arcade game culture is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Oh yeah.
To, I think, a healthy development of esports overall, and it was this idea of shoulder-to-shoulder gaming that completely fascinated me, because it was drawing upon that interest and excitement that I had with traditional martial arts, where you would stand toe to toe with somebody that you may not know, and go into either physical or digital combat. And that, Street Fighter 2,
I hear the chickens.
Really represent. Yeah, sorry, I live in Kaneohe in Hawaii, and so we have a nice collection of chickens in the background running around.
Perfectly fine.
No, but yeah, it was absolutely that appeal. I mean, it was even unique to Southern California, because I would actually play in an arcade where some of the top players at this particular arcade that I would go to was actually frequented by some of the most notorious gangs in the San Diego area. And so I would actually play, and again, it was this unique ethos of video game culture and arcade culture, where in no other context would I be close to a particular gangster in my life at that time. But with Street Fighter, I would walk into the same room with some of these gangsters, place the quarter down, press the button, get together, and start to sort of bang away at a game in which we would just enjoy our time together. And it was just one of these things where we would shed our personas for the few minutes that we would interact with each other. And it was a special kind of odd moment to share with people that I would normally not associate with.
And that's interesting that you bring up the whole quarter culture. And let's stop on that for just a second, because I don't think people realize, gaming again had such a negative connotation, especially for us growing up in the 80s and 90s, that arcades were a waste of time. But for a lot of us, these were our social clubs in a lot of ways. These were, we did get to interact with people in different ways. Again, people who we wouldn't necessarily go to school with or associate with out in our neighborhoods. But the place for me was Tilt, which was in Foster City, California, at a mall called Fashion Island, which basically had shut down by that point, except for the ice rink where Christy Yamaguchi used to train, and then the arcade was there. And the idea of being able to just put your quarter and walk away, stand back from the thing, and not somebody have come up and grab quarters and run off. I mean, I never saw that happen. Was really kind of there's like those weird social norms, the ones that you don't have to speak about. You just know what to do, and everybody kind of respects the quarter and respects the order and next player up and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Again, it's one of those things that I think I would like to see sort of move into the next iteration of digital games culture when we talk about esports, because I think there's a powerful social cohesion that is made and fostered through that sort of face-to-face physical presence in gaming that is definitely lost when it comes to mediated interactions through technologies. And so, yeah, I'm very happy that we had this sort of like common sort of shared experiences with Street Fighter.
Well, and now let's kind of transition, I guess, a little bit going from the arcade. You're now in Hawaii, and you're bringing up again the idea of, can we build this into our current competitive structure? Being in a state like Hawaii, made up of multiple islands and small communities and a very tight community, what is, for those of us, especially mainland, who, it's very easy for us, it seems, to travel interstate, if you will. What is the culture kind of like in Hawaii when it comes to schools and competition and things of that nature? Because I asked that question because I did an interview recently with a gentleman from Ireland, and I thought, this would be a great way for Ireland to connect to the world, and they found that there were technical issues going off island. So what is Hawaii, what's the Hawaii gaming culture like at this moment?
Yeah, so for us in Hawaii, I think it's important to acknowledge, number one, sort of both of the unique aspects that Hawaii does bring to the scene. I think one of those things is that it's gaming culture and sporting culture in Hawaii is very tightly knitted to family culture as well. So if you live in Hawaii, one of the common things that people will ask you when they first meet you is, what high school did you go to? So there is that very small town folksy feel to Hawaii, even though Hawaii itself is one of the densest locations in the United States. We have close to 1.3 million people, about 1 million cars. We have around, I think, close to the same number of skyscrapers as San Francisco as well.
Oh, wow.
Many people are really shocked that Hawaii itself is now a proper urban center. I mean, we vie for the top worst traffic locations in the United States between LA, New York, and us in Hawaii. So it is a place that is quickly modernizing and getting very, very crowded, but at the same time, it still maintains that very traditional and a very Asian cultural feel to respect of family, elders, and community itself. So that really kind of contextualizes, I think, whatever we talk about games or sports itself, that Hawaii is deeply embedded in that environment. But at the same time, it's a place that sits at the crossroads, as it always has, between the continental U.S. and East Asia. That provides a unique context, again, with its gaming culture. We have always had a fabulous gaming culture, whether it is digital games, video games, or just general board games, or anything that comes to games itself, gambling as well. We really, really enjoy the context of games. It's been a very, very strongly embedded feature of Hawaiian culture. And
I do want to stop on that for just a second, because I remember going to Hawaii with my high school band in 1993 and talk about that kind of the arcade culture. I saw it there when I was in Oahu. I spent a lot of time in an arcade there. But the other thing I saw a lot of was Pogs, which I had never heard of Pogs, but apparently in Hawaii they had hit big. And even seeing that Pog culture, if you will, where kids were trading these milk caps sat inside of cartons. I mean, it was just interesting to see that as an 18-year-old. Actually, I think I was 17 at the time, but seeing that as a 17-year-old, and as you said, that family feel, that kind of how you identify, and it was all very much there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Pogs. I mean, that is part of the past, and also something that people continue to want to bring back. There's actually a video game that a local developer created that he wanted to turn into a competitive game that is revolving around Pogs. And so, yeah, it's absolutely. I'm actually shocked that you brought that up. I didn't know you experienced that part of the past of Hawaii, but yeah, it's firmly there. Yeah. So that love for games in general, whether it be high-end, resolution type games with high-end PCs or bottle caps, we kind of span the spectrum there. Yeah.
And you've also, as you said too, you also spent about 10 years approximately in South Korea. So you've had some, I guess, a fairly diverse view on esports culture and gaming culture, I guess, around the world.
Yeah, so esports and for me has been this again underlying continuous line of reoccurring themes, either in the past or in the background or at the foreground, as it is right now. So I lived in South Korea right around the time when South Korea was just beginning to host the World Cup with the World Cup with Japan.
Oh, soccer.
This is soccer.
Okay.
I was there right after that happened, and it was an amazing experience, because I've seen something that I had not expected to see. It was just sort of this amazing collection of people coming together to support their own country, and that was my first introduction to South Korea. Sort of this collective mass of again, sort of not sort of problematic nationalism, but it was this idea of being all together and supporting a single cause. And that was kind of something that I saw with how South Korea was kind of addressing the world in many facets. And for me, esports was something that was not at the foreground. I was still playing video games, and I was, of course, playing StarCraft as well at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very much in the background for me. I just, for the 10 years that I was there, it was one of these things where I just saw happening and was kind of in disbelief, but also wondering, is this going to be something in the future that we're going to have to deal with?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was an amazing experience. One of my first experiences in South Korea was literally going to my uncle's house and turning on the TV and flipping past OGN's channel and seeing a collection of StarCraft broadcasts. And I thought it was a joke. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. The first time I saw the channel, it was literally just the camera was just focused upon the game itself. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And then the camera pulled back, and then you had the players. Mm-hmm. And then the camera pulled back even further, and then they would show the fans. And that was my first introduction into what would be kind of proper, like, modern esports at the time. This is, again, 2004. I was just like, this is really interesting.
And you weren't an educator by trade. I know that. What were you doing as far as work at this time? Because now it sounds like, a lot of the stuff that you're doing with esports in Hawaii kind of translates more into the education field. But what were you doing at this time where you saw this and maybe it stuck in the back of your mind?
What was I doing in South Korea?
Yeah. As far as career choice at the time.
Yeah, I was actually teaching English.
Okay.
I was teaching English at a university in Incheon, and it was just one of those things where I just never expected, like, to imagine that something like competitive gaming would be brought to the fore in my life.
You and me both.
At the time, yeah, exactly. And but yeah, at the time I was just teaching English at a local university.
Yeah, and because you did bring up Robert Morris, and Robert Morris was kind of the impetus that got me started as well too. And the story I tell people is it was the right place, right time, right location. Where one of our assistant superintendents, I was in Rockford, Illinois at the time, which is only about an hour west of Chicago, and had heard about Robert Morris and Kurt Melcher handing out scholarships for esports, and he kind of just asked, "Can we do something like that?" And it was this weird light bulb of, like, the permission I'd always been asking for. It was like the oxygen in the room finally got let in. The passion project, I guess, if you will, kind of got ignited. Where was your, I guess, was it through your master's and your PhD work where the passion for this, the connection, the permission came through? Because you did talk a little bit briefly about the getting the okay for this research for your PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. It was this idea of being allowed to do serious research and inquiry into a topic about esports. That was, for me, I think the opening step that allowed me to dedicate more time and to also be more confident in myself that I could pursue this as a serious topic. So I think for me in my personal journey, the way I am sort of situated in the larger discourse of the esports community, especially the collegiate esports community, is that I orient myself as somebody that is really I take care of how the research and the research community is looking at the collegiate space. So my own research is not oriented towards, for example, learning about better communications, learning about team dynamics, learning about competitive strategies that players can articulate in high stressful situations. I really do take a very personal investment in the players themselves, and that came about largely because of my trip to Robert Morris in 2015, where when I began to do my research, the very questions that I wanted to ask and the very sort of particular theoretical lenses that I was sort of wanting to impose upon the students were so wholly outlined or out of line from what was actually being told to me and how the students were interacting with me, that I went back to the drawing board after I finished my time at RMU, and I asked myself, what were my goals in doing this type of research? And eventually I really started to have a rethink about caring about the students, not just asking about questions regarding expertise and talent and skill play. I wanted to actually figure out, like, well, not just figure out, but I wanted to give voice to the students, to have them tell me what were things that they were going through that were either constraining, problematic, or enabling for them, as they have done in any other sort of field. What sort of things are important to them as they go through this career of collegiate esports, and that's really set me off. Yeah.
Is it more to their experience through their esports program, or is it just their esports participants and you're finding out more about what makes them tick, I guess you could say?
Yeah, I think it started with the particular parameters within the program itself and what it has to offer, but it soon spilled over, like all qualitative research. So my personal research perspectives are definitely qualitative and ethnographic, and I was really interested in what the programs and what their time in the programs was offering them, but it's of course naturally spilled over to before the programs and after the programs. So for me, yeah, it was important to look at that whole trajectory.
And I know that me also working on my PhD, mine is in the field of instructional technology and looking at esports and looking at self-determination theory, intrinsic motivations. I've done a lot of qualitative and quantitative work. Just nothing that I'm putting into my actual dissertation work, but more just informational about our own programming that we're running and we're seeing. And I guess the structures of the programs are so very important. It's not just, of course, as we know, and those of you who've listened to the podcast know, when I talk about this, we're using esports as a vehicle for so much more than just playing games and buying computers and setting up really flashy labs. We see so much more that's taking place with community building. You know, we talked about the arcade culture and the respect and how people rub shoulders together in those spaces. Is this looking more to at the community as a whole, or looking at the individual?
Well, for me, it's specifically, as you know, I've been to UCI for the past 3 years. The time that we caught each other was actually one of my last visits for my research. So I'd been there 3 times before the previous 3 years, and I've really, narrowed my research down basically around a case study of the particular players and teams for UCI, roughly around 2016 to 2018. So the study itself is very narrow, but for me, there are particular larger themes that can be useful when studying the community itself, because UCI has brought in a number of unique players and players from unique circumstances that I think can help us to imagine what I think will be important public policy questions that go into the future at education and esports. Just because the fact that UCI has brought in both very normal students that look at esports as a hobby and nothing more, and they have a couple of those, and also players who look to the tier 2 scene and say this could be a possibility for them to experiment with semi-professional esports. And then you have players who outright want to go back into the LCS or into Overwatch League and to live the former glory days of their lives as professional players. And so for me, UCI really represents this interesting petri dish of intersecting interests, expectations, and possible future promises or failed promises. And for me, I think that's the important thing, and that's the reason why I chose UCI as a spot, is because of the fact that there really is such a unique intersection of students in that place.
Yeah, I can see that as well too. The one issue I guess that I have, and I've expressed this sometimes to Mark Deppy and conversations I've had with people at UCI. On the surface, the face of the UCI esports program, if you will, is very male dominated, white and Asian. You don't see a whole, but again, they point to the diversity behind the scenes, if you will. Sam Anton being a perfect example. She's been on the podcast now a couple of times. I guess even as I came back, I was at a conference just this past weekend in Des Moines where I saw 8 collegiate esports teams, all of them male, all of them predominantly white male. When is this flip? Because we know girls are playing the games, and as much as we have girls and women involved in our programs, I don't see them as faces of programs. I don't see them as leading as much as supporting. Do you see any change happening with this in your years of looking at this over time? Am I off base to even to suggest, like, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? I guess is the phrase.
That is the paradox, right? The idea that this is the paradox is that they're actually women in esports, girls in esports, women in college esports is nothing new. Mm-hmm. They've actually been there from the beginning.
Right.
If we look back at the very first, at the origins of CSL, which is, if we look back at the history of collegiate esports and however you define collegiate esports, if we take the point of CSL as kind of the successful example of a continuous program that's moved forward into today, that was started by Mona Zhang, right? She's been there from the very beginning. There has been a collection of women, as you rightly say, in the background. Carmen from UBC, who literally quit her position on the league team to run UBC Esports. Mm-hmm. There's a collection of women who, for whatever reasons, have always been there, but have always been in the background in supportive roles, managerial roles, or team support. What is happening now with institutional support of varsity esports has not changed much. The very same types of dynamics that we've seen at the very beginning of grassroots-led, student-led college esports has replicated in institutional varsity-based esports. How that is going to manifest in the future, I am not sure. I think it's one of those million-dollar questions because the more we push it from the top down, the more inauthentic it looks to the community itself.
Sure.
And it's a very careful balance, as you know, as many of us know. We want to help prosper, diversify, and be more inclusive within the space for young women and girls. Mm-hmm. But to do that with a heavy hand, or even a moderate hand, there'll be pushback. There'll be pushback.
I can see that, and I agree with you. It's just, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, we've been doing this for so many years, and a lot of us, and I think you've expressed this as well too in the past, is looking at stereotypes and stereotypical gamers and building programs that only speak to stereotypes or to the kids who are the surface level ones who are immediately attracted to this. It's one of those things. I'm not saying it's keeping me up at night. But it's one of those things where I keep a very watchful eye to it. And I haven't seen anybody who's really doing it well. Even our program, my high school program that we have in Racine, my goal is I want to have a cross-section of my teams or a cross-section of the school. The demographics of the team should match the demographics of our school. Right now, we're only about a third of our team is people of color, and about 10% are women involved in the play space. So I know I'm not there yet, and I'm just looking for that. But the collegiate to me is more, it just seems glaring in, again, who's the face of it, who's leading it versus the support. I guess I want to see more face, but that's something where, as you said, if we're really forcing the topic, are we doing it in an authentic way? Are we doing it in a way where intrinsically motivates people to be part of it? I don't know that. I don't know that at all.
Yeah, it's really one of those things where it could be intergenerational. It could take a very long time. I'm of the opinion that this is a long haul question. When it comes to, for example, Title IX issues, the current debate around this, especially with esports, is that it may be a case in which it's less about checking boxes and filling quotas, and more about a case in which we create a culture of inclusivity and see where that leads. And that is something that is another way of looking at this, because yes, checking boxes and filling quotas is kind of the direct path towards the type of inclusivity we want to have. But yes, it looks very bad. It can push people away. And it might be a better way in which we take a less heavy-handed appeal towards these type of goals and just simply create the right types of conditions, both at the club level and at the varsity level, to let things flourish for now, to create those kind of spaces. And I don't want to use the word safe space, because really there is no such thing as a safe space. There are only kind of like safer spaces for many people. So to create those kind of safer spaces in which women feel included. So yeah, you're completely right. I don't see anybody in the space doing anything that, makes me smile and think things are going in the right direction. But I think the best we can do for now is to make sure that we're being as inclusive and as open and as welcoming as possible.
And as we kind of transition, because I want to talk a little bit about your program at the University of Hawaii here. As we transition into that, one of the things too, it's not just the inclusivity that I have great concerns about, especially at the collegiate level. I have concerns about the churn, I guess you could say, the churn rate of kids coming in and out of programs, of scholarship dollars being given to kids. And really we have no data right now, because this, again, is so new. We're only talking about the collegiate scholarship dollar amounts, and the teams have really started to pop here in the last couple of years. But are you at all concerned? Maybe I'm one of the few people. Are you concerned about, what will be the graduation rates? What will be the churn rates of kids in these programs?
Yeah. I mean, it's, tack it on to a list of things that we're worried about in the space. Yeah. I am concerned about these important outcomes that we're looking to when it comes to traditional metrics of success for a student itself, and graduation rates are an important part of that. I think if you're going to want to convince administration about the usefulness of these programs, definitely. We're living through technically at least the first class that has graduated, beginning with RMU itself, of scholarships. Esports is still very young. And yeah, it's one of those worries. It's one of the things that I'm sort of just thinking, like, how are programs going to address this? What type of things are they going to do to make sure that students are both committing themselves to their academics, but also their time as competitive players? But the one thing that really kind of moves me is that beyond graduation rates, I'm really concerned about, again, going back to this idea of what do the students themselves see as problems via their careers as college esports players. So yes, graduation rates are very important, and those are one of the things that we can put our finger on and say this is a quantitative measure that we can see that's either improved or not improved. But I sort of go back to the idea that I really want to look at the personal stories of these players, because right now a lot of research, a lot of speculation about the college esports space is wandering in the dark, and also imposing a framework that is perhaps not sensitive to the players themselves. So part of my goal of my research is to outline these basic questions of what are important to these players, what concerns do they have, what type of complexities are they going through, what type of issues are they going through as not only students who have to get a career when they graduate, but also the type of personal risks that they have to go through to actually get into these programs themselves. What themes
are you seeing? Are you seeing any themes right now, or is it pretty individualistic as far as some of those questions that you have?
Well, they're definitely, based upon what I've seen so far, the themes themselves are, number one, that there's been less conversation about the role of community colleges that I'd like to see in this space. I've come to realize that, yes, there's a lot of interest in high school esports and how the high school esports scene can serve as a pipeline into college. But from what I've talked about with the community that I've been investigating, is that that community colleges play a really important role. A really important role in the experiences of players that go into collegiate esports at four-year institutions or traditional colleges themselves. And so one thing that I would like to get out there in terms of a wider discourse is to understand, what are the roles of community colleges? Because community colleges are a fantastic space to develop for esports, but they suffer from, as you're talking about with churn, it's even worse at the community college level because of its transient nature. But at the same time, a lot of students really form, beyond the high school side of things, really form a deep identity and in a clear, vision forward in their lives through community colleges. And so for the players that I did talk to, a lot of their competitive experiences did not happen in high school, at least not in an organized setting, but actually took place through their experiences in community college. And so that's a big thing that I'm kind of sort of looking at right now.
And I'm great that you bring that up, because in Wisconsin, that seems to be where the growth is happening right now. In fact, in my own community of Racine, we have Gateway Technical College, which is a 2-year community college. And that's where we're launching a new esports program here in the fall, with the idea being that, we want to make sure that this experience that we have for our 230 scholar gamers that we currently have right now in the Racine Unified School District, that even if everything else goes sideways, that they have a social connection to a college that doesn't currently even have much. It doesn't have an athletic culture at all. So they do have a lot of clubs and they do have a lot of things like that. But, to be able to say, hey, you step onto campus and there'll be familiar faces and it'll be a familiar space and a familiar experience that you're tied to in your high school experience. I think the collegiate or the community college experience is going to be important, at least for our community. We also have UW Parkside, which is an extension school of the UW system. And then, of course, we've got UW Whitewater, which is also another one of those relatively close. But I really believe that you're right about this whole community college experience, and not just having the teams there, but, for example, every community college seems to have a unique thing that they do, if you will. And the technical colleges, especially the one in Racine, of course, we have the cybersecurity and the computer networking and all of this stuff. But we also have a tremendous food service program, an event planning program through that. And of course, I think people look too surface at what collegiate esports can be when they say, oh, we're going to have our team and we're going to have like an esports business track, or we're going to have an esports marketing track. And really, I just look at it and go, what are you doing well already? And let's just take what you're doing well already and let's support it with this program. So, for example, again, the hospitality and event planning. I mean, with an esports tournament, that it is all about event planning and hospitality and food preparation and things like that. Those things are so important to this. And you don't necessarily need to develop a whole separate track, but you can leverage the university resources that you have now to do what you're doing and do it really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's sort of a weakness of not just esports, college esports or high school esports or professional esports overall. It's, I think, a weakness of how people perceive technology and innovation itself and technology advancement, is that they believe that everything has to be sort of new. Everything is sort of only happened now, and everything has to kind of be separate from the past. And I think one thing that's been apparent in gaming communities, especially for us here in Hawaii, and it's sort of a discourse that I've been trying to emphasize over and over again, because I do have those questions about, will esports require us to build out something new, something different, for example, from our journalism program or from our media broadcast program. And I think one of the responsibilities for us in the space itself is to temper expectations and to put a realistic spin on what actually is going to happen or what the path forward means. And a lot of it is not building out something completely new, but really piggybacking off of an existing infrastructure.
Right.
That is what is quite shocking to a lot of administrators, is that they think that esports is something completely drastically new, but it is not. You can build upon what is existing already. And again, it's one of those biases I think people have with technology, is that they assume this is a complete breaking off of the past. And it definitely is not. It's definitely not. And as you rightly say, when it comes to media, broadcasting, events planning, community management, so much of what we need depends upon traditional knowledge domains.
Right.
We're not talking about something completely different. And I think that actually puts a lot of administrators at ease when I do say that, because that is something that they can work with. And that's something that they can understand.
And it even comes down to something as simple as, oh gosh, what was I going to say? I mean, we hit on just a whole lot of stuff there, but I go back to, again, you talked about the technological side, and people see the computers and the games and they look so foreign and alien and unique to them. The similar thing happened probably about 15 years ago when all of a sudden schools started handing out laptops to kids, and then it became iPads. And they expected there to be this tremendous jump in learning that was going to take place because kids had access to a device all day. And what we saw was really no change at all. Test scores stayed flat. The kids now had access to a computer, but teachers were still teaching in very much the same traditional ways. And I think it soured a lot of people on technology for a very long time and made them hesitant to make investments. And I think with this, again, you're right. We have to temper those expectations. And as we build these programs, we have to make those expectations realistic, that what you're doing is saying, we're going to shift some dollars, we're going to shift some mindsets and some ways of doing things to modernize them. But hopefully, your learning structures, your institutional goals, your institutional values are still there, and this isn't something that's a part of, but a part of what you're doing. So that, I guess, that kind of transitions us into the program that you're building at the University of Hawaii now. So where are you at right now with your program? I know I've seen that you've played matches against Boise State, for example. Dr. Chris Haskell's been on the podcast before. Where are you at right now with your program at the University of Hawaii?
Yeah, right now, thanks to Dr. Chris Haskell. We got a front page showing with our SDSU match, so it was really nice of him.
That's really nice.
We are currently, so I just turned in the business plan to the University of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. President David Lasner had asked me and the committee that I work with to come up with a long-term business plan that will look at creating college esports across the system at UH, which is 10 campuses, both four-year institutions and community colleges, both on Oahu and across the islands. And it's quite ambitious. I originally wrote a business plan just for Manoa, the main campus on Oahu, and then he came back and said, "No, let's look at this at the systems level." So
that's awesome.
It really is he has been a real visionary for us in imagining something that is beyond what I imagined. So I turned in the business plan for him to look at, and it's presently in front of him, and we're just waiting and seeing as to what the next big step will be. But whatever it is, and I don't imagine things really changing. I think things will be moving forward. It will be the first initial phase will be a year or two long project in which both me and my assistant Kevin and perhaps some other hires as well at UH will require us to go to the different campuses across the islands to see what is taking place. Because it will take a good year and a half to get everybody close to point A, where we can say, okay, let's move forward as a system itself. I don't want to come in there and say, for example, here's the Manoa campus, we're imposing upon a structure on all you guys at the different islands. I think the key for us will be to go there and to talk with the community and to see what exists, what type of games they're playing. Even to even see if they want to create a competitive program, and to really just fact check and collect some information about the different communities there.
So what you're saying is that even though, again, people in the mainland or across the world just see Hawaii as Hawaii, you're looking at Hawaii from the perspective of every school, every island, and it goes back to, again, the communities that you talk about, people connecting to their high schools. Right. The island of itself is much more diverse than it just being Hawaii.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's important to acknowledge that, because even though we are Hawaii as a state, each island itself is very different, and each island itself is going to have a gaming community that is going to be catering to a different set of circumstances. Not every campus, I imagine, is going to have intense interest in League of Legends and Overwatch, and that's something that we're going to have to work with, because we do have a lot of students who are interested in rhythm games. Osu is a really popular game on our campus, and
I'm sorry,
we have
what
brought
game?
that in. Osu, it's a rhythm kind of game.
Is it like Beat Saber?
And, yeah, something like that. Yeah,
okay.
Basically, and we have to kind of work within those parameters, because we hope to get students involved in a competitive program if it's possible, but I don't want to be in a situation where we are just coming in and telling what the community should do. So it's really going to be a fact-finding mission. It's going to take a while, but like I said, it's an ambitious program, an ambitious plan that the university has taken on, and I'm really happy to be a part of it.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask to just touch on this. So the university system is building up their programs. Where are the high schools at right now in Hawaii?
So the high schools right now, we have close to 50 of them participating. It should be probably around 50 of them participating in League and Smite, and in other types of games as well. I forget which ones there are besides that, that are informally associated with the high school. I think Smash might be one, but right now it's primarily League. They're all competing, together under Play Versus, and this is something that us at the UH level, at the high school levels, and at the even middle school levels are trying to, and also at the state level, are trying to figure out how we can move forward with really a grassroots participation at the high school level that developed all by itself. It's been really quite vibrant. I've been really happy to see people start to volunteer their time, the teachers themselves. It's really kind of been an impressive effort across all sort of levels right now. But the high school side is going to explode, and it's going to continue to explode. And it's one of the things that the state and the universities are just keeping a watch on right now.
Perfect. And so obviously, when you've got 50 high schools, you've got a pretty good pool. I don't imagine that many people leave Hawaii to go. I don't know what the numbers are that leave to go to university or college, but I would imagine that having that kind of a pool also helps with development of program as well for the collegiate.
It does. I think that's one of the key things for the high school side of things, is to see what we're going to do at UH. I think that's what everybody is sort of waiting right now upon the middle school and high school and at the state level, is to see what UH's next step is going to be. We are such a massive entity on the island when it comes to education and employment, that even though the high school side of things are taking off, they are really looking to see what is going to happen with University of Hawaii, because again, it lends to that discourse of what are the next steps for these students at the high school level. Parents, of course, are very happy to see their kids involved with technology, and the tournaments are fun to see, and having kids sort of collaborate around technology has been a mission for the high schools. But eventually parents are going to ask, what are the purpose of these tournaments? What are the purpose of these games? And of course, that natural expectation is going to lead to, is there something beyond this? Is there a pathway to college? And that's why the university itself plays such an important role, because all three levels have been important in pushing forward the discussion around esports. But right now, everybody is looking to UH and seeing what's the next big step.
Fantastic. Well, Sky Kauweloa, I really appreciate your time here appearing on the Academy of Esports. Well, audio, but being on the Academy of Esports podcast. Is there anything else that you wish to add? Any other ideas or thoughts that we've missed that maybe you wanted to get out?
For now, I think for us as a sort of stay tuned type of thing, like I said, things are happening this year. University of Hawaii, I firmly believe, is going to be making a big announcement about what is going to take place in the coming semester. And I only look forward to bigger and better things. But at the same time, as you rightly say, and I think as it needs repeating, is that Yeah, there are significant issues in the collegiate space, and those issues revolve around gender and racial diversity, and that's something that I hope, as we sort of further talk about these issues, that Hawaii itself can lend an interesting perspective, because for us in Hawaii, we are a diverse state. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that has been kind of a hallmark of the university. But at the same time, we also have our own issues with inclusion and diversity. We're trying to figure that out as well, because, this issue is not going to go away. Like I said, it could be intergenerational. But I think the more that we share and talk about what we're doing, I think the better it will be.
Perfect. Yeah. Sky Kauweloa, thank you so much for being on the Academy of Esports podcast.
All right. Thank you, James. Pleasure talking.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.